Okay. Yeah. Yeah. My name is Morris Franco, also known as Jen. I was born in Gatooma, Rhodesia, on the 8th of July 1926. I have an elder sister. Well, I had an elder sister, I had a younger sister and a brother. My two sisters died fairly recently. My brother lives in London. I'll start my story saying that we had a very close-knit family. My mother and father were cousins. Their two mothers were sisters, the eldest and second daughter in the family. And they knew each other from their childhood. My grandfather on the Leon side, because she was a Leon, my mother, was a Zionist from the very beginning. But his father wasn't originally from Rhodes. He used to travel from Romania to Palestine in the 1850s, and on his travels he used to stop in Rhodes. And around about 1870 he stopped in Rhodes and met a woman who he decided to marry, who was from the Hannon family. And that's how I come to be related to the Hannon family. And on my mother and father's side, they were both aliyahs. So that's how come I'm connected to certain branches of the aliyah family as well. The main person in our family was my Uncle Beers, who was the eldest in the family, and his father was the youngest son of the man who came from Romania and settled in Rhodes and married a woman from Rhodes. They say, or we found out in recent years, that there were 3 Jewish communities in Romania that had Sephardi communities. One was in Bucharest, one in Ploiești, and Craiova. And apparently my great-grandfather, whose name was Isaiah, came from Craiova. Anyway, he lived in Rhodes, and my uncle, as he grew up, he was said that he was going to be a rabbi. His father wanted him to be a rabbi, but it wasn't very much to his liking. And at the age of 18 or 19, he left with his friend Chaim Galanti and went to live in Alexandria, where he worked in a cigarette factory. I don't know what he actually did there, but while they were in Alexandria, one of the Bennetters, who was already in Rhodesia, met them in the street and said, "What are you doing here? Go to Rhodesia, that's where you'll make money." So they decided to go to Rhodesia, and they caught a boat and went to Beira and travelled by train to Penelonga, where, of course, there was already a Jewish community. Amongst them, of course, Mervyn Hatchell's father, who was there since 1904. This was in 1909. Mr. Bidi Al-Malek of the Sephardi community was living there, Leon Ferreira and a number of others, and they joined them. And what they were doing, of course, was trading, African trading, and serving the miners. At the same time, that was in 1909. In 1909, my father, at the age of 17, decided to go to America. And he got on a boat and started to sail across the Mediterranean. And on the boat, he got sick. He was taken off the boat in Genoa and put in hospital and sent back to Rhodes. He was dissatisfied about getting back to Rhodes because he had decided to leave it. And he said to his father, "I'm not staying here, I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going to Jerusalem." He went to Jerusalem in 1908 or 1909, and he spent a whole year in Jerusalem living with an aunt and a great-aunt who had gone there. They were both widows, of course, and they had gone to Jerusalem to die in Jerusalem, as was the custom in those days.
From Rhodes?
from Rhodes. But after a year that he spent in Jerusalem, he decided, no, he's leaving. He wants to go to America, and he went back to Rhodes. He was a shoemaker by profession. He started to work at the age of 13, and he made shoes for people in Rhodes for a year, and he saved enough money to buy another ticket, and he went to America, and he arrived there in 1911, on the 7th of October 1911, at the age of 19. And he stayed in America for 12 years. When he left Rhodes to go to America, my grandfather, my mother's father, came to him and said, "You're going to America. When you come back from America, you'll marry my daughter." He was 19, my mother was 15 at the time. And he said, "Yes, I will," you know, expecting to have gone and to make some money in a matter of 3 years. But he was gone for 12 years. And 12 years later, in 1923, when he came back, my mother was still waiting for him. Anyway, they got married in 1923, and my father already had a business in America. He was a shoemaker, and he had a shoe repairing business. I've got a photograph here, and he made money in America, and he was going to go back to America
with his wife
because he had a business. And my mother was the last member of her family to be home with her younger brother. All the rest of her family was already in Rhodesia, following my uncle who had gone there in 1909. This already 1923. And then she was pregnant, and she was ill during her pregnancy, and she couldn't travel. My father said, "We're going back to America," and my mother said, "No, I don't want to go to America." He says, "Why not?" He says, "Because all my family's in Rhodesia, I want to go there." So he said, okay. He decided, well, he wasn't... He wrote to somebody in America called Walensky, who was related to the Roy Walensky apparently, and told him to sell his business and send his money to Rhodesia. And he was one of the richest young men who ever arrived in Rhodesia. He had about $10,000 from the sale of his business in America. Anyway, we lived in a place called Eiffel Flats. My older sister was born in Rhodes, I was born in Rhodesia, and my younger sister and brother were also born in Gatooma. When he arrived in Rhodesia, after living 11 years in Atlanta, he lived 1 year in New York and 11 years in Atlanta, which at that time had a population of about 400 to 500,000 people. And he arrives in Eiffel Flats, which had a white population of 200, and about 2,000 or 3,000 blacks. And he said to my uncle, "What are we going to do here? You know, what business?" He says, "Well, we're going to open a store for you, and you'll sell clothing to these people." And my father said, "How are you going to make money selling to these people? They don't wear clothes even, you know." And you could buy vests from Hong Kong at 6p a dozen, and all they wear is a pair of shorts which costs 1 and 6p. You know, you're never going to make money that way. And of course, he made money in America, but never made that sort of money in Rhodesia. Although we all always lived a comfortable life in Rhodesia anyway. When he arrived here, he had a brother.
When he arrived in Rhodesia?
Already in Rhodesia, who had come, besides his sister's brother, his wife's brothers and sisters, and his brother had a clothing factory in Salisbury. But in 1932, his brother decided, for Zionistic reasons in those days, decided to leave and come to Israel, which he did. So always had a background of Zionism in the family. And my grandfather apparently was Zionistically inclined. He was always, and he actually came to Palestine in 1895 and visited the 2 aunts which he had here in Jerusalem, and spent about 4 or 5 months here. and I used to come backwards and forwards from time to time. Anyway, we lived in Eiffel Flats as children, where there was a school, and I grew up there till the age of about 7 years old, when my mother got ill again, and we were forced to move to Salisbury for medical reasons, and we took a flat in 5th Avenue. My father remained working in Rhodesia, and we lived there in a block of flats in 5th Avenue. While there, Habonim was started in 1933, and my sister joined, and she went once or twice, and then she persuaded me to go to Habonim with her one Sunday morning, and I went the following Sunday morning, but it wasn't very much to my liking, so I didn't go again, you know. After about a year or two, my mother got better, and she decided to go back to Eiffel Flats, and we had already started school in Salisbury. I went to Prince Edward Junior School. My sister was at the convent, and my younger sister was just starting school. So rather than take us back to a school in Eiffel Flats, she decided to leave me and my older sister at boarding school in 1936, when I was 9 years old.
5 years old?
9 years old.
9 years old.
I was 9 years old. I went to boarding school, and my sister was 11 years old. And I spent the next 8 years of my life at boarding school.
How was that, Jen?
Right?
How was it being a boarder?
Well, it was a part of life. I mean, you know, I spent more time at home at boarding school than I did at home. In fact, when I left school at the age of 18 and I went back to Eiffel Flats, and I was there for the holidays in February, I used to go and help my father in the store before I started work in Salisbury. And people used to come into his store and see me there, and they used to say to him, who's that person you've got there? He says, it's my son. He says, no, it's not. I know your son. He's a little boy. I mean, my younger brother was 10 years younger than me. He says, no, that's my son. They said, I didn't know you had another son. You know. Anyway.
But Jen, when you were a boarder at school, were there other Jewish kids at boarding school?
I was in a boarding school. Amongst them was Abi Menashe and his brother Benji, and there were 3 or 4 other Jewish boys in that thing. There were seven boys in our boarding house. Out of 65 or 70 boys, 7 or 8 of them were Jewish. And in Jameson House, I was in Rhodes House, and in Jameson House there was also 5 or 6 Jewish boys. And then in Salou House, when I was in junior school, there were also 2 or 3 other Jewish boys. But otherwise, I was brought up in a Church of England atmosphere.
But were you able to go to Jewish...
Yes, I was allowed every day, Saturday, I was allowed to go to shul. And they allowed me from time to time to go to Hebrew lessons, but it was always difficult because it was during prep time and I had to be in the prep room, and so I didn't have very much education as far as Hebrew was concerned. But my father wanted me to have Hebrew lessons, so I actually used to go for private lessons on Hebrew to Reverend Rosen, that's Kipps Rosen's father, who was the previous rabbi before Rabbi Khan, and he lived in Rhodes Avenue, which was not very far from the school. So I was allowed to go to his house, where he used to teach, try to teach me Hebrew.
And who did you do your bar mitzvah with him?
No, I didn't. I had my bar mitzvah in Eiffel Flats, but he was my moel. In other words, when I was circumcised, he was the moel that did. And when my son was circumcised, it was done by his son, Kipps Rosen, which was a coincidence, you know. Anyway, in my last year at school, for some reason which still baffles me, I was made a prefect at Rhodes House, and I was the second prefect, and the head houseboy was there for 2 months, and he turned 18 at the time, and he decided to leave school and join the army, which he did, and they made me head of the house which was, you know, because I thought there were people in the house far more deserving than me, you know. But anyway, I was head of the house for a year, and I used to go to shul on Saturday, and on Sunday I used to go to church with my house because I was the head of the house. And on Sunday night I used to go to chapel with the boys, and I used to sing all the hymns. I used to lead prayers in the morning for the boys, you know. So I used to go to church on Sunday and to shul on Saturday.
When did you meet Hazel?
I met Hazel when I had left school. My uncle, who was amongst other things a farmer and who had gold mines and who had a business and various things, wanted me to be a farmer, and I would be in charge of one of his farms, but I didn't want to be a farmer. So he said, all right, what else do you want to do? So I said, well, I'd do engineering. He said, well, that's also not bad, because he had a gold mine and he had a workshop in the gold mine, and I would be useful to him from that point of view. So I became an apprentice at a place called Morton Jaffray, which was a mechanical engineering firm in Victoria Street. And I worked for Morton Jaffray, who eventually became mayor of Salisbury, and for 5 years, where the first year that I worked for him as an apprentice, I earned 24 shillings a month, you know. And it wasn't even enough to keep me at the boarding house where I lived. And my father used to subsidize me, because all I was earning was just under £5 a month. Yeah. When I left school, of course, and I was working at Morton Jaffray, I started to go to Zionist youth, because when I first went, I stayed with my aunt before I moved into board, and they were all her children were Zionistically inclined, and I joined Zionist youth. And eventually I took an interest again, and when I was grown up, I rejoined Habonim when I was about 22 years old, 23 years old, and became a madrich and in charge of the Shomrim. So I missed all the youth, although I knew all the members of Habonim. I was never ever a member of Habonim as such, except for the 2 or 3 times that I attended when my sister attended. My sister attended Habonim all the time she was there until she went to boarding school. Then she wasn't allowed out anyway.
So Hazel was already in Habonim at that time?
Hazel was already, and that's where I met Hazel, and we went out together for 5 years, you know, before we got married. Yeah. And of course, we got married in 1954, and I think we were going out for so long that eventually Harold's mother spoke to me and said, "Are you going to ask my daughter to marry you or not?"
Do you remember going to Gatooma to start Habonim?
Yeah, we do. We used to go in my car, actually. We used to go in a little Morris Minor that I had, and the 4 of us used to go together on a Sunday morning to Gatooma. We used to go once or twice a month, actually.
We went once, not twice. I think once. I don't know if we went as often as that, but we went twice. We went twice.
No, more than twice, actually. Yeah. And eventually we persuaded the Gatooma people to come to one of the camps that we had at Sussman's farm, which they thoroughly enjoyed, of course, you know. Then, of course, in 1954 we got married. Nearly a year after Buzz and Monica got married. They got married at the beginning of the year, and we got married in December, about 11 months apart. But we spent all our, you know, we were together. In fact, I was in the same class as his brother Zach in junior school, and Buzz, he was in the class just when I was in standard 3 in junior school, but Buzz was in standard 2. So we've known each other for about 84 years, 82 years anyway. Yeah.
When did you decide to come to live in Israel?
Well, we wanted to come to Israel we came here in 1967 for a visit, the first visit we made to Israel, and we said you know, we're going to go to Israel, definitely we're going to go to Israel. And we were planning to go to Israel, and my uncle died, B.S. Leon died, and I was one of the executors in his will. There were 3 others, but I was one. And my mother said to me, you can't go now because you've got to fix up Uncle B.S.'s business and thing. And it took us 6 or 7 years to straighten his estate out. And then, you know, when he left the business, he had an engineering firm as well, F.A. Jenkins, which he converted into a motor garage. And we got the Persia agency, and we ran it at a Persia agency and a petrol station. And then they started giving us trouble, and then it became urgent for me anyway to leave the thing. And the Persia were pressing us to do certain things which we couldn't afford because, you know, there were so many heirs in my uncle's estate. Although he was unmarried, he left money to all his nephews and nieces, and then to his 3 sisters, and to the one brother who had a son, Sam. He left the bulk of his estate. So it was slowly winding down, and we were virtually forced to sell it. We were approached by Lonro to buy the business, but they couldn't buy it, and eventually we sold it to Pusey and Payne, who were the previous Peugeot agents before us. And after that, I worked for Crown Clothing for a number with Nick Alladef and Alfie Alladef for a couple of years. And when Nick was also planning to come to Israel, I said to Alfie and Nick, I'm also going to Israel. And we left in 1977. And never regretted it to this day. People say, well, why didn't you go to South Africa? Why didn't you go to England? And I said, well, I think the only move, and the right move, was to come to Israel.
And Hazel felt the same?
Pardon?
Hazel felt the same?
Definitely. Well, Hazel said, I'm not going anywhere. I've got my brother in Israel, and that's where we have to go. And I think it was definitely the right thing to do. I don't think we've really ever regretted coming there. You know, I've never had any second thoughts about it. And people say to me, why did you go to London? You know, because my brother came to Israel and spent 5 or 6 years here. Then he had marital problems and left. And he left, and he lives in England now. And my sisters, one of them lived in Rhodesia and then moved to Cape Town. And my younger sister, who went to university in Cape Town, met a man from South Africa by the name of Sachs. And she lived in a place called Robertson for 53 years until they also retired and went to live in Cape Town. And he died about 7 or 8 years ago, and my younger sister died about 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, Jen, you have a lot of knowledge about the community and about the history of the community. How do you explain that you have such a strong...
Well, let's put it this way. When I left Rhodesia, I was in 11 different committees. I was a member of our congregation. I was chairman of our Hebrew Kadisha. I was earlier on the Zionist youth meeting. I was in Kazo as youth representative. I followed Bello Cass as youth representative on Kazo. And I was also involved with the Numismatic Society, which wasn't Jewish. I was involved in the Gem and Mineral Society, and through the Gem and Mineral Society did a course on commercial geology at the university, and also a member of the Numismatic Society committee. And in addition to that, when Boris Analek was chairman of the Board of Deputies in Salisbury, I was the youth representative on his committee. And I was also on the committee of the B.S. Leon Home as the Board of Deputies representative in the committee, because the B.S. Leon Home left as the proviso that the old age home must be for all the people of Rhodesia, and and Jewish people and Christian people must be accepted equally. And he donated the land on which to build, and when they needed more land to build more buildings, he gave them more land. Yeah.
Was that the biggest donation from his trust?
Not really. I think his biggest donations were done to given to designers, to the Zionist Society for Israel. I think in 1939, my uncle was selected as a member of the South African delegation to the Geneva Congress.
The Zionist Congress.
Zionist Congress. And I think as a reward for the money that he gave to the thing, because he was one of the biggest donors to Zionist funds in those days. I'm sure afterwards there were people who were giving bigger donations, but in those days he was giving. And he actually visited Palestine in 1936, and in 1939 he was here as well. Yeah, yeah.
And just to wind up, we've heard from Harold, but obviously the relationship between Harold and Hazel. You've come together. You're a family here together, living in Israel. How's that been? How's that experience been?
Terrific. Look, we lived next door. My mother lived in a house next door to Lily's parents, which was Harold, and next door to the Menashe family, which was next door to her on the other side.
So very close knit.
Very close. Yeah, yeah.
And the house was taken over by Gus and Bullet.
Wonderful name.
When my father died at the age of Mr. Menashe and Mrs. Menashe used to come and see her almost every day, and the one on the other side, and the person from behind, Mrs. King, who was also lived behind her, used to come and visit her also every day.
Okay. 1 second. Do you want to add anything to that, Jen?
Hey?
Do you want to add anything?
Not really. I mean, I've got plenty of stories.
I'm sure you have a lot more. Well, thank you. Thanks very much.